Prime Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, is scheduled to hold a meeting with Guterres. Let's now cross to SABC's international news editor, Sophie Mokoena, who is in Pretoria, where the meeting will take place. Sophie, a very good afternoon to you. Perhaps let's talk about the UN Secretary General's itinerary, especially ahead of that meeting with Minister Lamola. What are we expecting from the two, from that engagement?
We know that the UN chief arrived in South Africa yesterday. The intention is to galvanize support for the world body in terms of issues that the United Nations has identified as critical issues. When you look at the globe in general, since the COVID-19, the economy of the world is very sluggish. The second issue, you have many conflicts around the world. Let me start on the continent. You have a challenge in the DRC. You also have a challenge in Sudan. How can we forget Cabo Delgado? And therefore, in terms of the continent, it's all about development, peace and security. The other important issue is the Middle East. The Middle East question must be resolved. We know that today the UN General Assembly will vote for a resolution that's calling for cessation of hostilities or ceasefire. But secondly, the UN General Assembly today will be supporting the UNRWA, which is an NGO that is helping those who are in need, particularly in areas where there are conflicts, when you look at what's happening in Gaza. And therefore, the other important issue is South Africa hosting the G20 next year. And therefore, the UN boss will be engaging stakeholders in South Africa, as we saw earlier on, where he had a meeting in Johannesburg, where he addressed them in terms of the priorities of the UN, bringing in the G20, the most industrialized group, to be at the forefront of development and addressing the issues facing the world. And he will be meeting Minister Ronald Lamola as the chief diplomat of South Africa, lobbying him to ensure that South Africa and the UN, as the multilateral organization, they are in sync in terms of how the world should move in terms of addressing the global challenges. He will then meet the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, as the person who is leading the presidency of this G20, to engage him in terms of critical issues, and also perhaps to bring to his attention the views of the United Nations on many other global issues. But I will be in conversation with the SG immediately after those engagements, and I will probe him on the visit to South Africa. I'll speak to Antonio Guterres about the Middle East. I'm going to speak to him about the recent developments in Syria, but also focusing on the interest of the UN in relation to the hosting of the G20 by South Africa. We know that he has been championing the reforms within the multilateral institutions, particularly the transformation of the financial system. The World Bank and the IMF, after the Second World War, the launch of these important institutions were geared to help those who were at the forefront in terms of stopping what was happening during the World War II. And therefore, it's not geared, or they are not geared towards addressing the needs of the developing countries.
Sophie, thank you so much for that.